What if I told you that every time any country buys oil, it quietly strengthens the US dollar and indirectly fuels America's power? Think about that for a second. A country in Asia buys oil, a nation in Europe imports fuel, even a rival of the United States pays for energy, and somehow all of it connects back to one currency, the US dollar. This isn't luck, it's not coincidence, it's a system, a very powerful system. It's called the petrodollar. For decades, this system has been one of the biggest reasons why the US dollar dominates the global economy. It's helped America borrow more, spend more, and maintain influence across the world, even in countries that don't politically align with it. But here's where things get interesting. If this system is so powerful, if the entire world depends on the dollar for oil, then why doesn't every American feel rich? Why are people still struggling with inflation, debt, and rising costs of living? Is the petrodollar truly benefiting everyday citizens? Or is it mainly empowering governments, banks, and large corporations behind the scenes? And what happens if this system starts to break? Because right now, countries are slowly exploring ways to move away from the dollar, and that could change everything we know about global money. In this video, we're going to uncover the full story, step by step, from how the petrodollar was created, to how it shaped global power, to whether it actually improves the lives of ordinary Americans, and most importantly, what happens if the world no longer needs the US dollar to buy oil? Because the answer to that question could impact every economy and every wallet on this planet. The US dollar isn't powerful just because America says so. It's powerful because the world needs it to buy oil. To understand the petrodollar, let's simplify it. Imagine every country in the world needs oil. Japan needs oil. India needs oil. Germany needs oil. Now imagine that no matter where they buy that oil, from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or the UAE, they must pay in US dollars. That means before they can buy oil, they first need dollars. This creates constant global demand for the US dollar. That demand strengthens the dollar's value. And when the world constantly needs your currency, your country gains enormous economic advantages. This is the essence of the petrodollar system. Oil is traded globally in US dollars, forcing countries to hold and use dollars. That means central banks stockpile dollars. Governments hold dollar reserves. Global businesses use dollars. Banks settle transactions in dollars. So the petrodollar doesn't just make oil sales easier, it creates worldwide dependence on the US currency. And this gives the US a unique privilege. It can create money that the rest of the world must use. That's financial power on a global scale. But this system didn't happen naturally. It was built during one of the biggest financial turning points in modern history. The petrodollar was born from a secret deal after America broke its promise to the world. Before the 1970s, the US dollar was backed by gold. Under the Bretton Woods system, countries could exchange dollars for gold at a fixed rate. That gave the dollar credibility. But in 1971, President Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility. This became known as the Nixon shock. Suddenly, the dollar was no longer backed by gold. This was dangerous. Without gold backing, global trust in the dollar could collapse in the next. The US needed a new source of demand for its currency. That's when America turned to Saudi Arabia, the world's biggest oil exporter. In 1974, the US and Saudi Arabia struck a deal. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. Saudi oil profits would be reinvested in US Treasury bonds. In return, America would provide military protection and political support. Soon, OPEC nations followed, pricing oil in dollars. This created the petrodollar system, and this changed everything. Because oil was essential for every economy. Countries now needed dollars not because of gold, but because they needed energy. This restored demand for the dollar. It allowed the US to maintain the dollar's reserve status. And it gave America a huge economic advantage without needing gold reserves. It was one of the smartest financial moves in modern history. But how exactly did this help the United States? The petrodollar gave America something no empire in history ever had: the power to print the money the world depends on. Because oil is priced in dollars, countries around the world must hold dollar reserves. That means global demand for the dollar remains high. And when demand for your currency is high, borrowing becomes cheaper, your currency stays stronger, and your government gains more flexibility. This gives the US 3 huge advantages. 1. America can borrow cheaply. Foreign countries recycle oil dollars into US debt. They buy treasury bonds. This helps the US government finance deficits at lower interest rates. That means America can spend far more than it earns. 2. America can print money without immediate collapse. Because the world needs dollars, the US can expand the money supply more safely than other countries. Other nations print too much money and face currency collapse. The US prints money and much of the inflation gets absorbed globally. 3. America gains geopolitical power. If global oil depends on dollars, then access to dollars becomes critical. This gives the US power to impose sanctions and control global finance. This is why the US financial system has enormous leverage. So yes, the petrodollar massively empowers the US dollar, but does that empowerment benefit ordinary Americans? That's where the story changes. America may control the world's money system, but that doesn't mean every American is winning. At first glance, it sounds obvious. If the US dollar is so powerful, if the world depends on it for oil, then Americans should be living better than everyone else, right? But reality tells a different story. Yes, the petrodollar does create some real advantages for everyday Americans. Because the dollar stays strong, the US can import goods more cheaply. That means electronics, clothes, and fuel often cost less than they otherwise would. It also keeps interest rates relatively lower, making loans and mortgages more accessible. But here's the catch. Most of the biggest benefits don't go directly to ordinary people. They flow first to large corporations, global banks, financial markets, and wealthy investors. Why? Because when the US can borrow cheaply and print money more freely, that money often enters the economy through financial systems, stocks, assets, and big institutions. This is why you often see stock markets booming, corporate profits rising, and asset prices increasing. While at the same time, wages grow slowly, living costs rise, and debt keeps increasing for average households. So even though the system strengthens the dollar, it doesn't distribute wealth evenly. For many Americans, the benefit feels indirect or even invisible. And in some cases, it creates new problems, because a strong dollar can hurt exports and manufacturing jobs, making it harder for certain industries to compete globally. So the truth is simple. The petrodollar makes America financially powerful, but that power is not equally shared. And that's why a country can dominate the global economy while many of its own citizens still feel financially stuck. The system that made the dollar unstoppable for 50 years is now facing something it has never faced before: competition. For decades, the world didn't really have a choice. If you wanted oil, you needed dollars. And if you needed dollars, you depended, at least partly, on the United States. But now, that reality is slowly starting to change. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly and steadily. More and more countries are beginning to ask a simple question: what if we don't use the dollar? And that question is powerful. China is already making moves to buy oil using its own currency. Russia, after being hit with strict financial restrictions, started trading energy in alternative currencies. Some oil-producing nations are becoming more flexible about how they accept payments. These are not random events. They all point toward one idea: reducing dependence on the US dollar. And the reason is not just economic, it's also political. Because when your trade runs through the dollar, you are indirectly connected to the US financial system. That means, in extreme situations, your access can be limited or even cut off. For many countries, that feels like too much risk. So instead of relying on a single system, they're building alternatives, new payment networks, new agreements, and new ways to trade. Now here's the important part. This doesn't mean the petrodollar is collapsing tomorrow. The dollar is still dominant. It's still trusted. It's still widely used. But for the first time in decades, its dominance is being questioned. And once a system this powerful starts losing even a little control, the long-term impact can be much bigger than people expect. If the world no longer needs dollars to buy oil, the biggest financial advantage America has enjoyed for decades could slowly fade away. Let's imagine a different world. A world where countries can buy oil in any currency, yuan, euros, or even digital currencies. At first, it may not seem like a big deal, but behind the scenes, something huge would be changing. Right now, countries hold large amounts of US dollars because they need them for oil and global trade. But if that need disappears, demand for the dollar could start to fall. And when demand for a currency falls, its strength can weaken. That's where the real impact begins. If fewer countries are holding and buying dollars, they may also buy fewer US Treasury bonds. That means the US government would have to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers. And higher interest rates don't just affect governments, they affect everyone. Loans become more expensive. Mortgages cost more. Businesses borrow less. Economic growth slows down. At the same time, a weaker dollar could make imports more expensive. That means higher prices for everyday goods, fuel, electronics, even food. In simple terms, life could become more expensive for the average American. But here's the important part. This wouldn't happen overnight. The dollar is still supported by strong financial markets, global trust, and the size of the US economy. So even if the petrodollar weakens, the dollar won't suddenly collapse. Instead, it would be a slow shift, a gradual loss of advantage. America would still be powerful, just not as financially dominant as before. And that small change in dominance could quietly reshape the global economy and everyday life in ways most people don't expect. The petrodollar helped build America's financial power, but whether it truly built prosperity for its people is a completely different question. After everything we've explored, one thing becomes clear. The petrodollar is not just about oil. It's not just about currency. It's about power. For decades, this system has allowed the United States to stay at the center of the global economy. It strengthened the dollar, supported government spending, and gave America a level of financial influence that no other country has ever had. But here's the deeper truth. That power doesn't flow equally to everyone. Yes, it creates advantages, cheaper imports, easier borrowing, a stable currency. But at the same time, many ordinary people still face rising costs, debt, and financial pressure. Which means one important thing: a strong currency does not automatically mean a strong financial life for every citizen. And now, as the world slowly begins to explore alternatives, the future of this system is becoming less certain. The petrodollar may not disappear tomorrow, but the unquestioned dominance of the dollar, that era might already be changing. So the real question is not just, will the petrodollar survive, but also, what happens to everyday people if it doesn't? Because any shift in this system won't just affect governments or global markets. It will affect prices, jobs, savings, and the cost of living for millions of people around the world. And that's why understanding the petrodollar isn't just important, it's essential for understanding the future of money itself.